Dude, you're doing nothing but lie.
I'm not lying about anything. I haven't said anything about anyone. I'm keeping the peace.
Dude, I had
went out.
And I know it's gonna be hard. All we gotta do is just keep pushing.
Stop! It's not stopping!
And the wolf pack.
They called him the silent one, the calm in the chaos, the quiet problem solver in a family full of noise and drama. But then one day, without warning, he vanished. Joshua Bam Bam Brown, the second son of the infamous Brown clan from Alaskan Bush People, disappeared from the screen, from public appearances, and almost completely from the internet. No farewell episode, no explanation, just silence. For years, fans have been asking the same burning question: what really happened to Bam Bam Brown? Why did the most level-headed member of the Wolfpack walk away from everything, fame, fortune, family, and dive headfirst into a life no one could trace? What few people realize is that behind his soft-spoken nature lies a storm of trauma, heartbreak, and reinvention, a fatal car crash, a wildfire that destroyed his home, a deep rift in his family, and a love story that both saved and complicated his world. While his siblings continued building their personal brands and posting updates, Bam Bam retreated into the shadows, working quietly on something that could change the way we live off the grid. He's been rebuilding not just ranches and boats, but an entirely new identity, away from the show that made his family famous. But this wasn't just a story of stepping away. This was an exodus sparked by loss, fueled by love, and haunted by tragedy. And as whispers of his eco-tech startup grow louder and photos of his life on a 100-foot ferry resurface, one thing becomes clear: Joshua Brown may be gone from reality TV, but his story is far from over. In this exclusive exposé, we uncover the real journey of Bam Bam Brown, from TV recluse to off-grid innovator, and why the road he chose left everyone stunned. But to understand his radical departure, we first need to return to the quiet moment that started it all, when he followed his heart and walked away from everything the world expected of him. In the early seasons of Alaskan Bush People, Joshua Bam Bam Brown was often seen as the backbone behind the scenes, mechanically minded, fiercely intelligent, and never interested in being the center of attention. But beneath the quiet demeanor was a man slowly preparing to break free. As the sixth season unfolded in late 2016, fans noticed a subtle but undeniable shift. Bam Bam began distancing himself from the camera, his screen time shrinking while his presence behind the production curtain grew. Then, in February 2017, he made the bold announcement: he was stepping away from the show indefinitely. The reason? A deeply personal one that took everyone by surprise. Bam Bam had fallen in love with someone from the other side of the lens, supervising producer Allison Kagan, describing her simply as a city girl who woke up his soul. He kept the details vague, but the impact of the relationship was seismic. Allison wasn't just another romantic interest, she was a decade older, had creative control over the series, and was deeply embedded in the television world, a stark contrast to Bam Bam's off-grid upbringing. The relationship sent ripples through the family. Rumors swirled about internal tension, disapproval, and a sense that Bam Bam was abandoning more than just a TV role. He was turning his back on the family legacy, but Joshua remained undeterred. That same year, the couple made a daring move that symbolized everything Bam Bam had come to value: independence, sustainability, and escape. They purchased a 100-foot ferry, originally named the Osprey, just before it was set to be scrapped. Over the months that followed, the vessel was gutted and rebuilt from the inside out, renamed Fathom This, and became their floating sanctuary. While the rest of the family focused on Alaska and Discovery Channel obligations, Bam Bam and Allison anchored their lives somewhere along the US coast, devoting their energy to creating a self-sufficient home fueled by renewable energy, minimalist living, and a deep connection to nature. It wasn't flashy, and it wasn't loud, but it was a deliberate departure from the chaos that had once surrounded him. By 2018, he had effectively severed himself from the daily rhythms of the show, replacing camera cues with solar panels, editing deadlines with engine repairs. Still, whispers of his departure left many fans confused and curious. Why would someone who seemed so rooted in the family's wilderness legacy choose to float away both literally and figuratively? The answer, it seems, wasn't just love, it was transformation. But the peace he found on the water would soon be shattered by something far more devastating than tabloid rumors or family tension, because what came next would change his life in a way no one could have foreseen. While Joshua Bam Bam Brown slipped away from television screens, he wasn't vanishing into obscurity. He was quietly building something far more impactful than a scripted wilderness life. As the world shifted toward sustainability and self-reliance, Bam Bam re-emerged not as a reality star, but as a visionary, working behind the scenes to create real-world solutions for off-grid living. From his reclusive base in the hilltops of northern Washington, just a short drive from the family's North Star Ranch, he and longtime partner Allison Kagan began developing a lifestyle that mirrored the rugged ingenuity he'd cultivated for years on Alaskan Bush People, but now without cameras or production teams. Sometime between 2022 and 2023, whispers began circulating in niche survivalist forums and local innovation circles. Bam Bam had launched an ecotech startup. Though the company's name remained under wraps and he never promoted it publicly, industry insiders and media outlets like Factual America began linking his name to experimental systems designed to support sustainable off-grid living. These included solar-powered water filtration units, compact smart shelters for emergency survival, and modular power management systems aimed at remote communities. Though none of the prototypes were commercialized widely, the quiet reach of his innovation caught the attention of documentary producers, educational institutions, and tech investors intrigued by the fusion of wilderness survival and modern engineering. With no Instagram marketing and only minimal digital footprint, the mystique of his work only grew. Some even speculated that Discovery Channel had approached him with offers to develop a new spin-off series centered around survival technology, though no official deal was ever confirmed. Meanwhile, fathom this, the 100-foot ferry he had transformed into a floating residence with Allison stood as a symbol of his philosophy. Stripped down, self-powered, and completely untethered from the conventional. As his siblings remained loosely connected to the entertainment world through social media updates, interviews, and occasional appearances, Bam Bam's silence became louder than their noise. He didn't post about his projects, he didn't give interviews, but he continued to work, earn, and evolve, turning his background in bush survival and mechanical improvisation into a quiet rebellion against modern dependency. Financially, estimates placed his net worth around $350,000 in early 2024, a modest figure bolstered by past reality show earnings, cameo appearances, and early investment in his green enterprise. Yet for all his growth, Bam Bam never publicly celebrated his success. He remained, as always, the quiet architect of systems designed to serve others. But just as he was finding balance between solitude and innovation, tragedy returned, not in the form of fire or family discord, but through a violent collision that would shake his world to its core and remind everyone that even the most prepared man can't always steer clear of disaster. On an otherwise unremarkable spring afternoon in May 2022, the silence Joshua Bam Bam Brown had so carefully cultivated was shattered in an instant. At approximately 2:30 p.m. on May 20th, Bam Bam was driving his 2015 GMC Sierra northbound along State Route 97 just north of Riverside in Okanogan County, Washington, a road he had likely traveled dozens of times before. But this time, tragedy was waiting around a bend. Without warning, a black Chevrolet Camaro heading south suddenly veered across the center line, slamming head-on into Bam Bam's truck. The collision was violent, immediate, and irreversible. Inside the Camaro were 38-year-old Gabriela Garcia Harrison and her 24-year-old passenger, Lena Martinez Gonzalez. Gonzalez died at the scene. Emergency services arrived within minutes to a roadway already soaked by rain and strewn with mangled metal. Witnesses and investigators from the Washington State Patrol would later confirm what had caused the wreck: slick conditions, loss of control, and a devastating split-second error by the Camaro's driver. Bam Bam, though wearing his seatbelt and fully sober, had tried desperately to swerve away, but there was no room, no time. His truck was forced into a ditch, the front end mangled and torn. He was transported to Mid-Valley Hospital, suffering minor but painful injuries, including spinal discomfort and deep bruising. The Camaro's driver, Gabriela, was airlifted to Central Washington Hospital after being stabilized. Her condition was never fully disclosed. As reports flooded in, one thing became crystal clear: Bam Bam bore no fault. He had not been speeding, he had not been impaired. He had acted appropriately in the split seconds before impact. Washington State Patrol Trooper Jeremy Weber made a rare public statement emphasizing that Joshua Brown had done everything right and was in no way responsible for the fatality. Yet despite his exoneration, Bam Bam disappeared once again, but this time, not by choice. The emotional toll was immediate and enduring. He issued no statement, refused interviews, and withdrew from public life more completely than ever before. In the weeks that followed, his social media accounts went dark. The Discovery Channel, usually quick to document or dramatize Brown family events, remained uncharacteristically silent. No tribute, no episode, no mention. And while photos of the crash, twisted metal, soaked pavement, and bright yellow evidence markers circulated through local news outlets like KPQ AM 560 and popculture.com, Bam Bam remained a ghost. Though physically healed, the man who had once poured his grief into productivity now seemed haunted by the weight of unintended tragedy. Unlike previous hardships, this was not something he could fix with tools or solitude. A woman had died, and he had been there. He had seen it happen. For a man who had spent his entire life building things, this was one moment he could not rebuild. And as the accident faded from headlines, Bam Bam faded further from public view until another kind of devastation brought him unwillingly back into the center of the Brown family's chaos. Long before the accident left Joshua Bam Bam Brown physically shaken and emotionally withdrawn, another tragedy had already scorched the foundation of everything he had built. In August 2020, a merciless wildfire surged down Palmer Mountain, bringing with it a fury no Brown family member could have foreseen. The North Star Ranch, their sanctuary, legacy, and most ambitious project, was engulfed in flames. For most, it was a disaster. For Bam Bam, it was the collapse of a dream he had spent years shaping with quiet devotion. Unlike his more extroverted siblings, who used the fire as a moment to engage fans online with emotional tributes and rallying cries, Bam Bam remained in the background, where he's always been most powerful, not with loud words but decisive action. The inferno destroyed multiple outbuildings, livestock shelters, and personal workspaces. Among them was the very structure where Bam Bam and Allison Kagan had poured their energy into sustainable engineering systems. Solar rigs, hydropumps, and off-grid blueprints now reduced to ash, while Bear Brown shared photos of scorched land and asked followers to support local fire services. Bam Bam was silently cataloging damage, salvaging components, and redesigning systems from memory. He did not post about his loss. He didn't grieve publicly, but he was, in many ways, the most devastated of them all. The North Star Ranch wasn't just a set for a television show. It was the physical embodiment of the future he had envisioned, a place where wilderness living met modern innovation, where family legacy could coexist with eco-conscious independence. And now it was blackened, broken, and barely recognizable. Footage from Discovery's tribute episode for Billy Brown, along with scattered behind-the-scenes clips from Bear and Rain, eventually confirmed what fans suspected. Bam Bam had been instrumental in the rebuilding process. Quietly, strategically, he returned to the ranch, not for the cameras, not for fame, but for his mother, for the mission, and for the land that still called to him. While others mourned on social media, he picked up tools. He sketched, measured, and re-engineered. And for once, he did not isolate himself completely. His grief, though buried beneath layers of composure, found a rare outlet in collaboration. But what hurt most, sources close to the family suggest, wasn't just the destruction of cabins or gear. It was the loss of a creative sanctuary, a space where he and Allison had tried to merge their two worlds, his survivalist past and her creative, structured vision. The fire didn't just take wood and wires, it burned down a shared hope. And just as he began to rebuild from those ashes, life would remind him once again that some losses go far deeper than anything flames can consume, because no matter how many structures he could restore, nothing would prepare him for the heartbreak of watching the strongest person in his life begin to fade away. Even before fire tore through the North Star Ranch and before a fatal crash darkened his path, Joshua Bam Bam Brown was already living under the heavy shadow of his family's most intimate heartbreak, the slow unraveling of the two people who had defined his existence. In April 2017, the Brown family was delivered a blow that no amount of wilderness grit could soften. Matriarch Ami Brown was diagnosed with advanced stage lung cancer. It was a reality that shattered not just their rugged way of life but the mythos they had built around survival itself. Given only a 3% chance to live, Ami's fragile frame dwindled to 77 pounds, tethered to oxygen tanks and hospital beds instead of the trees and cabins she once roamed. The family made a stunning decision, one that flew in the face of their off-grid identity. They left the bush, they abandoned Alaska, they traded isolation for IV drips and silence for the beeping of hospital monitors in Los Angeles, where Ami underwent grueling chemotherapy at UCLA's Ronald Reagan Medical Center. Through it all, Bam Bam remained composed in public, but visibly strained in family footage. While his siblings broke down on camera, he processed the pain in the way he always had, internally. But it was clear his mother's suffering tore at the center of his world. Even after her tumors shrank and doctors declared her in remission by late 2018, the trauma lingered. And then came the second wave of devastation. As the family tried to build a new future on their 435-acre property in the Cascade foothills, Billy Brown, their towering patriarch, began to weaken. Years of seizures, respiratory infections, and the brutal toll of living off the land had left him frail. In early 2021, he was seen with nasal tubes, visibly struggling to breathe, his once dominant presence reduced to quiet resilience. On February 7, 2021, tragedy struck again. Billy Brown suffered a seizure and died suddenly at the age of 68. It was Bear Brown who broke the news on Instagram, calling his father their best friend and hero, while the Discovery Channel released a tribute to the man whose life had inspired the series. But Bam Bam, true to form, remained silent. No public statement, no emotional video, no Instagram story, just silence. His grief was private, guarded, expressed not through words but through action. Behind the scenes, he reportedly helped manage the estate, estimated at $415,000, left without a will and now under Amy's name. And while Rain and Bear posted tributes and threw themselves into family healing, Bam Bam withdrew. Observers noted his absence online, a digital disappearance that coincided with his deepening role as the family's quiet executor, the one who solved problems instead of performing pain. Even in the Discovery Channel's one-year remembrance, his role was muted. Yet those who knew him said it best: he mourned deeply, just differently. Raised in a life where resilience was currency, Bam Bam internalized grief the way he learned to endure the wild, by staying still, steady, and silent. But even as he carried the pain of his father's sudden passing and his mother's brush with death, another chapter of emotional conflict was unraveling beneath the surface, one rooted not in survival, but in love and the quiet war it ignited within his own family. If the Brown family was a fortress built on unity and survival, then Joshua Bam Bam Brown's love story with Allison Kagan was the first visible crack in its walls, a deeply personal choice that rippled into something far more controversial. By late 2016, as the cameras captured the beginning of the show's 6th season, Bam Bam was already shifting. What fans saw as a quiet retreat from screen time was, in reality, a man falling in love with someone from behind the lens, Allison Kagan, one of the show's supervising producers. She had directed over a dozen episodes, and her resume included other reality juggernauts like Teen Mom 2 and 90 Day Fiancé. On the surface, she was exactly the kind of sharp, experienced creative who could complement Bam Bam's introspective mind. But love within the boundaries of a television production, especially one centered on family and isolation, was never going to be simple. The relationship stirred discomfort among the Browns, not just because of its professional implications, but because of what Allison represented. She was 10 years older, a city woman with a high-profile media background, and her presence was perceived by some family members as a disruption to the natural order. While Bam Bam had dated before, this time felt different. This wasn't a fling. It was a commitment that threatened to alter the very foundation of his relationship with the rest of the family. Rumors began swirling that his growing connection to Allison was causing internal strain, especially as Bam Bam tried to shield her from what some insiders described as a cold reception from within the family circle. The age gap, her role as a senior figure in the show, and the idea that she was partially responsible for shaping how the family was portrayed on screen, all of it fed a slow-burning rift. Still, Bam Bam held firm. "I hope we can blend our lives," he once told fans, "and I can take her back to Alaska." But instead of Alaska, the couple found refuge on water. In November 2017, they purchased a 100-foot ferry just days before it was set to be scrapped. While most of the world was navigating political tension and digital saturation, Bam Bam and Allison were gutting steel hulls, installing power systems, and turning a discarded vessel into Fathom This, a floating home that mirrored their resistance to convention. Anchored at times off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, the boat became their world, away from scrutiny, far from judgment. Their life at sea wasn't just about escape, it was about designing a new chapter, free from expectations and rigid identities. And yet, as much as he embraced this life, Bam Bam couldn't shake the gravitational pull of his origins. When Amy's cancer returned, he set sail back toward the chaos, rejoining Alaskan Bush People, briefly in 2019. It was a move that said everything. No matter how far he traveled for love, His bond to his family, flawed and complicated as it was, ran deeper than distance. Still, the tension lingered, and though never discussed on camera, fans could sense the invisible divide. Bam Bam's love had liberated him, but it also reshaped how the family operated, forcing everyone to navigate a delicate new dynamic. And while his siblings played their parts in front of the lens, Bam Bam's off-screen choices were rewriting the show's legacy in quiet, irreversible ways. But the deeper question remained: could a man split between loyalty and love ever fully belong to either world? And as he drifted further from both, the truth became undeniable. Bam Bam Brown wasn't just escaping fame, he was quietly rewriting his future. For years, Joshua Bam Bam Brown remained exactly what fans had come to expect: silent, distant, and elusive. But in 2025, the man once dubbed the quiet mind of the Wolfpack sent out a faint signal through the fog. It wasn't a grand television comeback or an emotional Instagram post, it was something subtler, quieter, and yet profoundly symbolic. In early January, a sparse yet professionally designed webpage linked to a new digital venture began circulating in survivalist communities and among longtime followers of Alaskan Bush People. The name of the site was unclear, the ownership unconfirmed, but the design, phrasing, and off-grid engineering concepts bore Bam Bam's unmistakable imprint. Observers noted mentions of sustainable battery systems, modular water filtration prototypes, and even blog-like entries discussing ethical wildlife integration, phrases echoing themes Joshua had been passionate about for years. While there was no formal press release, the site appeared to be a blueprint, not just for technology, but for a brand. Then, in May 2025, the whispers became harder to ignore. In a brief, fan-circulated video captured at a rural sustainability expo in eastern Washington, Bam Bam was spotted walking alongside his younger brother Noah. Though the footage was grainy and distant, both men were seen handing out materials that included diagrams and QR codes. The event was never broadcast, no Discovery crew followed them. But the appearance set off a ripple effect of online speculation. Was this the beginning of a new Bush-inspired tech series? A low-key launch of a retail line for survivalists? Or simply a quiet man dipping his toes back into the public sphere on his own terms? Whatever the case, it was the first time since 2022 that Bam Bam had been seen engaging with an audience. Fans pored over every pixel of that short clip, noting his slimmed-down appearance, subtle gray in his beard, and a quiet smile that suggested peace, or at least acceptance. More telling than anything else was what wasn't said. There were no social media blasts, no partnerships, no monetized live streams, just presence, deliberate, purposeful, and limited. For a man who had spent nearly a decade dismantling his on-camera identity, this was a quiet statement. He hadn't vanished, he had simply evolved. Reports circulated that he was in talks with Noah about launching a YouTube series blending practical wilderness systems with modern tech solutions, still unconfirmed. But the very idea of Bam Bam producing content on his own terms, stripped of drama, branded intros, and production mandates, felt in line with his minimalist philosophy. His digital footprint, though small, began gaining traction among environmental circles and off-grid advocates who referred to him as a wilderness futurist, a title that, unlike reality star, he seemed more willing to embrace. And yet, with each small step toward visibility, he remained cautious, controlled, always in motion, but never predictable. Because for Bam Bam, reclaiming his narrative wasn't about returning to TV, it was about rewriting it from scratch. But as the public began reconnecting with his work and quiet leadership, one final question loomed large in fan forums and among media trackers. Was this the new beginning of Bam Bam Brown's legacy, or just the closing chapter of a man who wanted to vanish with purpose? Today, Joshua Bam Bam Brown stands at the edge of two very different worlds, one rooted in the wilderness legacy that made his family famous, the other quietly evolving into something far more modern, intentional, and self-defined. And as the years tick by, the public image of Bam Bam has shifted from the shadowed brother on a reality show to something more mythic, a digital ghost, a reluctant pioneer, a man whose silence speaks louder than any scripted scene ever could. Unlike his siblings, who continue to engage with fans and in some cases court controversy, Bam Bam has chosen stillness over spectacle. He hasn't disavowed the past, but neither has he clung to it. His absence has never felt like rejection, it's felt like release. every tragedy he endured, from the devastating fire at North Star Ranch to the fatal crash that nearly broke him and the heart-wrenching loss of his father Billy, has only sharpened his edges and refined his purpose. His romance with Allison Kagan, once seen as a disruptive force, now reads more like a turning point, a decision to choose love, design, and introspection over performance, ego, and repetition. The ferry they restored, Fathom This, remains a floating metaphor for who he's become, an off-grid sanctuary built from ruins, designed not to impress but to endure. And while the startup he's quietly nurturing continues to evolve behind the scenes, its message is clear. This isn't about launching a flashy product or reclaiming fame. It's about building something real, something useful, something that lasts. Even in a digital age obsessed with updates, selfies, and constant visibility, Bam Bam's greatest power may be his refusal to participate in the noise, and yet his influence persists. Fans study old episodes not to watch the drama unfold, but to catch moments where he fixed a generator, stabilized a collapsing shelter, or said something profoundly simple in a sea of chaos. In a family known for extremes, he has remained the quiet center, the eye in the storm. But the real question isn't where Bam Bam Brown is now, it's what he's trying to teach us by staying silent. That healing doesn't need an audience, that innovation doesn't need applause, that you can grieve, grow, love, and build, all without a hashtag, a catchphrase, or a series renewal. The legacy of Bam Bam Brown is not about isolation, it's about intention, and as he continues shaping a life on his terms, away from the noise and beyond the expectations, one truth becomes unshakable. The man once known as the Silent Wolf may have said less than anyone else, but in the end, he may have lived the loudest truth of them all.